Yeah.
I guess we'll start with how have you've obviously been living in Japan, so start the podcast like that, I guess. So,
Okay. Yeah. So where should I look? Look at you.
Where
Look at the
you
camera.
oh, you can
Just talk to us normally, and the
us,
camera's just picking it all up, so
Yeah.
it's totally fine. Yeah.
So you can either look either way, and
Okay. Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been living in Japan for 7 years now,
Yep.
which has kind of gone by pretty quick. Moved there in 2017 for Super GT. And then, just been staying there ever since, basically trying different categories, moving up to different teams. So, been loving it, but it's flown by.
Yeah. Can you actually tell us a bit about the Japanese culture? Because for us, as you were saying upstairs, like there's a lot of difference between obviously Australia and Japan, and you've come here and you have to acclimatise back to Australia. So what's like the cultural differences and like with your language, you said you were intermediate. So can you just explain a bit about that?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty different because like I raced in the States before I went to Japan, and before that, obviously, always in Australia. So I was very like kind of used to the whole Western mindset when it comes to the team dynamics and all that type of thing. But in Japan, it's very much like kind of it's more segmented. I think like a little bit more hierarchy style. Like you have to listen to the team boss, and he's got a bit more power, a bit more say.
Yeah.
But I guess one nice thing in Japan is a lot of the private teams as well, they're actually quite well funded, usually by the team boss. So they have a little bit more say, but they're paying all the bills. So you go, yeah, it's all right.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a difference, I think. And then outside that, the language barrier has been a pretty big one as well, just because some teams have English speakers, but other teams have zero. So like my first season with Honda had zero. So I was like, oh man, like I'm kind of moving up, but I'm also adding an extra level of challenge into the whole process. So yeah, that's been pretty interesting just to adjust to all that. And I would say like I'm reasonably well adjusted now.
Yeah.
But it's still not like natural all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I've got to ask, we were talking to Bart, Dan's coach, Barton Mora, and he said he tried to go over there, and I know I've lived there as well. It can be quite, an insular community, and they can be protective of it, and sometimes it is hard also. Like, they're very friendly and everything as well. But how did you break into the scene when there was that language barrier? Because was there sort of a connections there, or how did it make? Because I know how challenging it can be to break through into the culture and have people, sort of receive you in that. How did you go about it and getting involved?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really know too much about it before I went there. And I think that was like a little bit of would have been nice if I had done a bit more research beforehand. The way like a lot of the drivers come through there is it's very much through their systems, Suzuka Racing School, Toyota Racing Academy, coming in with sort of my own CV from a few different places. They didn't necessarily like take into account, what's the Road to Indy all about? Or as you say, very insular type of place. So, I think that was its own challenge as well, just kind of proving myself there. I had a CV I thought that would sort of carry me into there pretty comfortably, but I basically had to kind of grow it again and sort of prove it again when I got there.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a challenge, yeah.
So how's the, obviously, we've raced karts and gone to Formula 4 together. How does their racing system work? So you start at go-karts, obviously, or even sim racing these days. How does it go from there?
Well, yeah, I feel like correct me if I'm wrong, it's been a while, but in Australia, I remember sort of you go through karting, then you're kind of on your own through that sort of like entry into formula cars, that mid-range sort of series, until you start creeping up towards supercars. You can have like Super 2 with some maybe team connection type of thing to like the main game. But in Japan, you've kind of got a system the whole way over there. And I think that's good or bad. Like if the system works for you, then that's great. If you're working well within the environment there and stuff, that's great. But I think that's the main difference, because you come out of basically karts and you've already got some kind of manufacturer connection, really. Yeah. Suzuka Racing School or the Toyota program. And then you're kind of like, if you're in one of those, you're kind of like helped and assisted along the way. You get into the right teams and you go to the next steps kind of a little bit more sort of assisted. Yeah. But I think here it's pretty freestyle, right? You get out of karting and then it's like, you want to race cars, off you go. Yeah. Find your way. So that's pretty, I say it different.
So are they like America, where they actually have like a money system, basically like a purse pushing them through the system ranks, like in
Yeah,
NASCAR IndyCar, or
a little bit.
you went to America, so you would have seen
Yeah.
both versions of, I guess, motor racing.
Right, yeah, like the Road to Indy system, right? Where if you can win the championship, you get the scholarship
Yeah.
year up. So that was what attracted me, because obviously, like, budget's a critical factor for people to get to the top. And it was always a challenge to be able to move to the next step. So that's the reason I went for the States. But yeah, it's more of a private version, I guess. It's like, it's not up for grabs just by winning the championship. If you're in one of the manufacturer systems, you have to prove it on the track and then like off the track with the data and heaps of different things. They kind of just have to approve it. There's not necessarily like a checklist. Oh, he's done this. Okay, he's in the next one. That's how it is in Road to Indy. But
Yeah. Do they have a licensing system like they have with the supercars license thing that's going on now?
no,
No. Have you
No.
spoken to Joey about that?
I haven't, no, but I've kind of seen a little bit of what's gone on, right? The requirement is a gold status of the FIA license, right? Something like that.
Yeah, so I think it's like, as you said, the FAO bronze, silver, apparently over there, apparently overseas, it doesn't translate to Australia, so they've got their own supercar, and that's what we're talking to about Craig in the episode before, where I was just wondering if Japan had something similar, because America kind of does with their purse, the Road to Indy thing, but supercars has got their own thing within it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's way more looser, I think, because like you kind of, in the series I'm doing right now, you get like a category of like amateur, expert, or pro, basically. They've kind of split their version of silver and gold is expert and pro.
Yep.
And pro is only if you've become like a Super GT champion or you're racing in GT 500. Everyone else, like GT 300 drivers, some GT 500 drivers are all in the expert class.
Yep.
So it's super easy. You don't need to be a certain license to move up. I think that's fine in Japan, but if you try and race outside, like if I wanted to come back and do supercars, it's a bit of a black hole for that licensing system or the FIA one. So
how did Super GT come about? Because Bart was explaining to Brooke and I, like it started from kind of like World Time Attack in a way, and it grew from a small thing to a big thing, and then had to control it. And can you explain to like the Aussie audience and the Americans like how that category came about?
Yeah, well, to my knowledge, it's kind of had a few iterations along the way. The one before Super GT was Japan Touring Car Championship.
Yep.
And that was kind of like in the 90s. I think Super GT was from 1994. Might be wrong. But that's when they kind of standardize it a little bit. And before that, it was very much more open and a little bit more like tuning shops in their backyard or tuning shops in their garage would just turn up with crazy cars that they've put together and race it like that. And there's a lot of sort of historical pictures of like, the early GTRs and stuff with huge body kits and all that time attack style setup. And eventually, I think just as things go, as the technology goes up, the gaps get bigger, so they have to control it a bit more.
Yeah.
So now it's pretty much FIA GT3 plus DTM Class 1 put together.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then, so where did you start with Super GT? Was it with Honda first, or was it with another? Because you've gone through a few categories or few, teams and stuff.
Right, yeah. It started with Audi, actually.
Yep.
So back in 2014, I was racing the Asia Cup Championship, which is Formula BMW, basically.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my first full season outside of Australia to race like abroad. And doing that championship kind of opened my eyes a little bit to what's available in outside of Australia. I didn't know about Super GT or Super Formula. And so that came about because I met a contact during that season his name's Hideki Noda. He's actually an ex-F1 driver from Japan.
Yep.
And in Japan, one of the Toyota teams is called SARD. You might have seen them in GT 500. They've run for like a long time. But they do, at that time, they had a team in GT 300 as well, which is basically GT3. So Hideki moved from 500 into running the 300 team. And I'd just finished my year in the States then. So this was a little bit after I'd met him. And I said to him, hey, I'm really interested to come and check out Japan. I kind of want to focus on that pretty seriously. And he said, well, timing's good because I'm moving into this team now. So I know your credentials outside of Japan. It's a little bit hard to just come in off the street, but it's good timing. So come and take a seat in the 2017 car.
Yeah, right.
So that's how it started. And then, it just went from there. So it was with Audi basically, but private team with a little bit of Toyota connection.
Yeah. So let's go all the way back to when you actually started racing with go-karts. How
Yep.
was like your introduction to motorsport? Because obviously people now see you. How many followers you got on Instagram, by the way?
10 and a half.
10 and a half.
Yeah,
There you go.
it's a big audience.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
so you got a big audience. So for them listening here, so you go back 10,000 followers, for example, like where was your first starting point? Like in Australia, how did it all
Yeah.
happen? Was it a hire kart? Was it a
Bad start.
It was a bad start?
Yeah. So my uncle used to race go-karts, and when I watched him, I was like 3-4 years old at Oakley,
Yep.
kart track. And then
Victoria.
in